This episode of No Time Like Joe Time is sponsored by Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella. Rena has grown up sheltered and cut off from the world, caring for her ailing mother. When fate catches up with her, she is thrust into a world of magic and intrigue she never knew existed, and the heritage she is not quite sure of. Read Fate in Flames on Kindle Vella.
Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. I'm Generic Joe, here to say the same thing each time before you listen to an episode. You can find No Time Like Joe Time wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm just that generous and kind of a guy. Please rate, please like, subscribe, and comment, because I'm magic. It also really helps grow the show, and I've loved the conversations I'm having. So maybe you can help your old friend Joe. Now, if you, and I mean just you, want to be a guest, you can email me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. Love to have you on, figure out what show you like, and then we'll have a meaningful discussion. All right, let's get to the episode.
Like what you are listening to? Check out Lazenlow on Spotify Music, a new and upcoming local band from Minnesota.
I'm going to First Avenue, what can I do?
Hey, thanks for tuning in for No Time Like Joe Time, where TV gets deep for no reason. Before we jump into another great episode, I've got a few nuggets of wisdom for you. Joe Time is available as a podcast on most platforms, but also on a YouTube channel. It is super helpful if you like and subscribe, because it allows more people to get eyes on it and makes me feel a little bit cooler. Please rate and write a glowing review for your old friend Joe. I will be reading reviews in future episodes. Also, I'd love for you to comment on life lessons you took away from the shows that you watch. Finally, if you would like to be a guest on No Time Like Joe Time, send an email to me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. It's always such a fun time, and the human connection is my favorite part of doing this. Thank you for listening. It means the world to me. Now, onto the episode.
Like what you are hearing? Check out Lazenlow, an up-and-coming band that can be found on Spotify.
I'm going to First Avenue, what can I do this time? We're in a hurry.
Make like wizards. Okay. Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where we look at clips from our favorite shows and make like wizards to pull out the magic lessons we learn. Each week, I have a new guest on to help me talk about those clips. Today, I am looking at a hidden gem from the 80s called The Wizard. I'm joined by an amazingly creative guest today. One of the most basic jobs of a podcast host is to know your guest's name. I have Paul Pape's name on my script. I've been messaging him on Messenger. Now let's see what Recording Joe decides to do. Owner of Paul Page Designs. Or
it's
is he?
Pape. Pape to sorry.
No, sorry. What is it?
It's Pape. It's like paper without the R. Pape.
Do you know how painful it is to edit these? I hope you're having a good time with it, because for me, I'm like, all right, back to the episode of No Time Like Gym Time. Joined by a great and creative guest today, owner of Paul Pape Designs, or as he describes it, Santa Claus for nerds. I'm a nerd. This works great. Please welcome Paul Pape. Oh, hey, Paul. I'm really excited to have you on this episode.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. Excited to dive right in.
Oh, for sure. I'm really ready to hit the ground running and look at some clips from The Wizard of Oz.
Wait, what? Yeah, that's not what we're watching.
Oh, sorry. The Wizards of Waverly Place.
Still, no. Wait, did you read the show I even talked about?
Right. Oh God, Paul, I'm so sorry. Star Wars, because it's wizard.
Doesn't even make sense. And it's not Star Wars.
Wizard of Oz?
What? No, no. You already said that. The Wizard. The show is called The Wizard. It's a show from the 80s. Have you actually even watched The Wizard?
Yes. But in a more accurate term, no.
Oh, okay. All right. Why don't you take a bit of time and watch the first episode? I promise it'll be worth it.
Okay. All right. I'll be back.
I'll be here.
30 minutes later.
That was amazing. And it inspired me to start thinking about some inventions. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk to you about some of them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. What do you got?
So the first one I'm thinking is like, so I'm going to call it the phone fork, right? So when I eating, I always focus on my food, but it will be attached to my phone so I can eat and watch.
That's what else you got?
Okay. I've been also thinking about this design. It's called wrench knife. Now for kids, it's a wrench and a knife.
Yeah, that doesn't seem terribly safe. Wait, isn't that from Scrubs?
Well, first off, we'll let the FDA decide if it's safe or not. And I don't think I've ever heard of Scrubs. Okay. My final one is a good one. So
Okay.
I've been trying to cut back on soda, right? And I came up with this thing called the shaker. And what it does, it shakes cans so quickly, you'll never want to open them.
That is an interesting idea, but
Thanks.
won't it get pretty messy?
Well, a little. It's the point. Here, allow me to show you. So it's just a little.
Dang you, Papney!
One thing I've noticed from our guests, including you, you're so awesome at that stuff. Just and my hope is always that somebody listens to this for the first time and they're like, this host is an idiot.
It's very much between two ferns. Yes,
Yeah.
It is. Got that Zach Galifianakis feel to it.
I didn't even think about it, but yeah, you're right. It's just, I don't know what it is. I love the self-deprecating humor and just, it works for me.
I understand.
So, in sincerity, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
We were talking before this and you were just blowing me away with everything you're doing. And so I asked, like, before we even begin, would you mind talking with the audience about kind of who you are, what you do, and just kind of your passion for creativity?
Sure. My name is Paul Pape, and I own a business called Paul Pape Designs. I also have a side business called Paul Pape It, which we'll get into in a second here. But what I am Santa Claus for nerds. I design and fabricate custom collectibles, and I've been doing it for about 20 years now. I've had the opportunity to work with companies like Disney, Universal, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, but I've also created pieces for thousands of pieces for people all around the world. My wife likes to say that I help make memories tangible. And so if you've got a geeky thing that you are really passionate about, I can make it turn into a reality, which is fun.
That's so cool. Do you ever go to like conventions?
All the time. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
But now what I'm working on is I'm actually teaching people how to do this. So for the last 6 years, I've been on Twitch. I don't know if you know what that platform is, but I'm a creative on Twitch. I'm an artist. Nice. And so what I did is I would spend up to 20 hours a week on Twitch creating the art that I make, but also teaching other people how to do it. And so now I spend a lot of time working with companies, corporations, and creatives to embrace creativity. We were talking earlier about something called the creativity crisis, and that's something that's very near and dear to me. What that is there's a metric that's been going on, and since the 1990s, there's been a 65% decrease in creativity in Americans, which is just crazy to me.
Right.
And as a person who lives his entire life as a creative, I don't see how people can not be creative. And so when I saw that, I was like, holy cow, I got to talk about this. And what it is it's just we don't teach being inventive or using our imagination or even playing anymore. We are more about getting the right grade, making sure the test questions are right, getting our work done efficiently and on time and under budget, but not actually doing anything to innovate, to help, move us forward. I mean, creativity took us around the world as humans. It took us to the moon. And what's funny is we went on the moon in the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay. The same amount of time from when we invented the airplane to when we landed on the moon has passed since we've been on the moon, and we haven't done anything with it.
Oh,
like we haven't had that. Like our progress should have been astronomical. We should be on Mars right now. We should have a permanent moon base, but because of other things that are happening, that creativity has been stifled. We don't have, we're not going into, STEM or STEAM. However, I like STEAM because it's got the arts in it, but like STEM is a huge thing, and it's not being really enforced anymore. It's one of the very first things to be cut is actually STEAM, which is crazy to me. So that's what I talk about, and I try to help to motivate people to be more creative, have more fun, and use your imagination.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're doing that, because we were also kind of talking a little bit beforehand. For me, growing up, I grew up in kind of a little bit of a dysfunctional family, and I was always kind of left alone, and I lived in my own imagination. I created this whole superhero, like my own superheroes, tons of them. And I'd be so into it. I go with my friends, we play RPG tabletop games, and that creativity really gave me a lot of hope. And so I think that's one thing I definitely want to teach my boys is like, have fun, like think,
Absolutely.
be creative. And I think I always talk about sometimes we don't realize we may need permission for something. Like, hey, it's okay for you to struggle with this. And I think being like, hey, it's okay to be creative. It's good. It's a message I really think the world needs to hear. So I
teach something called failing creatively.
Yeah.
Which is no one has ever learned anything by doing it correctly.
Yeah.
You only learn from your failures. And so, but we get hung up on failure. We think, oh, we've done something wrong. Where in reality, what happens is in everything that we fail in doing, there is a nugget of wisdom to be learned. You just have to look at it from the right perspective. So that's why I call it failing creatively. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, but he failed more than he actually invented. And he has a quote that's like, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways not to do it.
Yeah, that's a great line. I love that one. Yeah. And I just love that whole. And one thing I do like it that you say failing creativity, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, failure. When I was a manager, we used to have failure Fridays, and it was where we would talk about all the mistakes we made during the week. And I would always go first because they needed to know it wasn't a trick. And what that led to is it actually reduced errors quite a bit, because we were all open to say, hey, I messed up, I did this. And then somebody else was like, oh, I'm going to do that tomorrow. Good to know. And so I think when you mention it, it makes it less scary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that if we embrace the fact that something can be learned from it, as opposed to just, like taking the fear out of it, because a lot of people are afraid to fail, especially at work, because it's the doom of being fired for doing something incorrectly. And where in reality, if you were trying to figure out a new process and you accidentally stumbled onto a way to make more money, and you went to your boss and said, hey, I found this way to make a lot more money, they would praise you from the heavens but that's still a failure that you fell into it. I mean, everything like post-it notes was created accidentally. Like Velcro was created accident. I'm like, all these things happen accident. Silly putty was an accident.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if we didn't fail constantly, we'd be missing out on so many great innovation.
Yeah, definitely. I was created accidentally by my parents. It's great. No, I'm kidding. That's not true. I was a planned baby.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a good one.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, this, I think, leads so perfectly in the show we're doing.
Yes.
So we mentioned in the opening, The Wizard. I'm guessing maybe a lot of people haven't heard of it.
No.
This was my first introduction to it. You mentioned it. I'm like, yeah, you got it. And I watched it, and it is so charming. This is my first introduction to it, but I'm wondering if you could talk about kind of your history with it, and if you want to talk about like what the show kind of meant to you, whatever you feel is right.
Sure. Now, you touched on having like a troubled childhood. That's literally my origin story as well. If I was to become a superhero, television raised me. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. And so I spent, and we didn't have like 900 channels like we do now. We had 5. When I started, they had 3. And you would basically just watch whatever you could. And we had VCRs. My mom was nice enough to buy 2, so we could record 2 channels and watch a third. And we would go through our TV guide every fall and spring and circle all the shows that we wanted to watch. And in the 80s, there was a show called The Wizard, which I'm a big fan of, like the fix it in a week type of scenario, like MacGyver, A-Team, Highway to Heaven, those kind of shows. And so they had this idea, this premise of a little person played by David Rappaport, who was an inventor and a toy maker, and he would go out and he would help people. And since he was seen as different, him going in and helping people as they were also seen as different, what made it super charming to me. But what really caught my eye is I've always been a guy who's tinkered with stuff. I've loved making things since I was little, and you saw in the opening this. So he's a little guy. It's a dwarf is the accurate term, but he has this giant duffel bag, and he has this like big burly dude who's his assistant, and he can't lift it. But by using alternative thinking, by being creative, he figured out how to put helium into the bag so that he could lift it seamlessly. And I was so struck by that you could use something like, I would never think to put helium that you see in balloons inside of a duffel bag to help lighten the load, but of course that would make sense. And it was seeing something used not how it's supposed to be, really, like, that is the cornerstone of my career now. It's just like, I will spend hours in the hardware store wandering aisle after aisle looking to see how I can use something not how it's supposed to be used, which is fun. And it all comes, I kid you not, it comes from this show. Yeah. This and MacGyver. Those are like the two things that formed me as a human.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? Like, I always think about this when I go to conventions, that something somebody made in the 80s inspired you to do all these things. And it's so cool I always like to think about, like, we don't always see how we inspire others.
No, we don't. There's a great expression I like to say is, your ordinary is someone else's extraordinary.
I love it. And now I'm stealing it. And I made that up myself, guys. That's great.
Well, the first time you use it, you give credit. The second time you use it, you give homage. And the third time, it's yours.
You are teaching me so many new things. Well, very cool. So yeah, we're going to jump into our first clip. Okay. And so we'll watch it, and then we'll pick what wisdom we get from it. So actually, these are kind of back to back. This is right before the scene you were saying. Okay. So they come in, and I always like calling him the wizard. He's thinking by playing drums, which is like, I feel like every parent's worst nightmare for their kids. But like, you have to support him. You're like, yeah, great, drums. So, and this is a conversation, and maybe to set up too, I should say. So the wizard just saw a kid, I think he has cancer, and he has an older brother who could do a bone marrow transfer. but he's been missing for 10 months. And so the wizard's kind of at a point where he's thinking about he's already decided he's going to go try to find his brother.
Yep.
So please share screen. Let me know. I've been having some issues with it, so let me know if you can see it.
That's how he thinks?
Good, you're up early. We haven't got much time. Darcy, phone Chester Howard. Tell him we're going to need to use his plane again. And get Linda to arrange blanket visas for South America.
There's no way I'm letting you wander all over South America. And I don't care how idealistic your reason is.
Alex, an idealist is someone who thinks because a rose smells better than a cabbage, it'll make better soup. I am not an idealist. What I am is a private citizen, free to go wherever I want. Now, if you two want to help me find Douglas Wayne, fine. If not, I'll see you when I get back.
Simon, you can't just go running off without knowing where you're going.
We're going out the front door. That's the hardest part of any journey. After that, I promise I'll let you know as soon as I do, if you're along.
Love that line. Where we're going is out the front door. That's the hardest journey. And I just like that hit me because that's something I've struggled with a lot, of just having that anxiety to try something new. And yeah, anything hit you particularly in that clip?
First off, that's a very young Gates McFadden who played the Doctor on Star Trek: The Next Generation. Beverly
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I've always been a person who believes that because there's no real failure in anything. I mean, you can do something incorrectly, but that journey, just do it. And I know that's overplayed, it's the Nike slogan and all that stuff, but I use both feet in is another expression that I like to say, because when I started streaming, I had a lot of people ask me like, how do you start streaming?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you turn on the camera. I'm like, well, but what if no one's there? Then no one's there, but it doesn't matter. Just go. And then, what, I don't know what to say. Just explain what you're doing. And it's really just do it. And what you find is that once you do that first one, like your first podcast, or the first time you come out with a new product, or the first time you try to sell your art, the first time you do it, you're going to be all butterflies. But after that first time, the ball is rolling. You have momentum. It is easier. That first step is always the most difficult. But once you start walking, it's all downhill.
Yeah. I feel like with that mindset and another mindset of like making failure your friend, like you can go, I always tell people like, I'm here to support you, to help you realize you can do so much more than you ever realized. And the other line I liked out of this is when he's like talking about, he's not an idealist, that there's something more to it. And I really like that line too, where, one thing I always talk about is when somebody's going through something, I don't like to be an idealist in that moment. I don't like to be like, oh, well, your cat died. Well, hey, at least there's a lot of other cats you can get. You can just get a new one. Like, no, I like to sit in that pain in that moment.
You have to give it space. Absolutely.
Exactly. And just be there. And so I that really resonated with me as well. And I just love how confident the wizard is. He's just like,
absolutely.
Look, I'm going. If you guys are coming, great. Otherwise, I'll see you later.
And shouldn't we all have that confidence though?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't we just be like, well, I'm going to go. Well, you're going to fail. And if I fail, I'll learn.
Yeah.
Let's try.
Was confidence something that was easy for you to come by, or did it take you a while to build your confidence?
I tell people I'm a broken boy. People have told me later in life that it might be Asperger's, but I've never really had it tested. But I have, I don't get nervous to talk in front of people, and I don't get that butterfly anymore. And so, it's a side story, but when I was in undergrad, I needed to have an extra class, and so I asked my professor if I could create my own class. He goes, well, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to create Nightmare Before Christmas, the stage musical. And he goes, you can do that if you can get the rights. And so I called Disney, like just the helpline, like at Disney World. And I'm like, yeah, I need to get the rights to Nightmare Before Christmas. And they're like, that's not what we do, but they have to help you because it's the happiest place on earth. And after about 3 days of phone lines, I talked to Tim Burton. I talked to Danny Elfman. I got the lawyer. And I now, if you Google deep enough, you'll see I actually own the rights to the stage musical Nightmare Before Christmas. Because I just like, well, why the hell not? You know, I'm just going to do it. And it's like the worst that can happen is they can say no.
Yeah.
But as long as you go at it, like understanding that there is more than one answer, like we all like, I always say my son is 17. He's dating now. And I'm like,
yeah,
he gets really hung up. He's like so nervous about talking to girls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, just as long as you go and ask them, knowing that there's the potential of a yes or a no or a maybe, then it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah.
But we always get so hung up on having the right, you know, well, I want them to say yes. And so if they don't say yes, I'm going to be hurt. But everybody has choice and there's always going to be multiple answers. And so as long as, you know, I have a story where I asked a girl out and I'm like, hey, would you like to go out? She's like, no, I don't date people I go to school with. I'm like, okay, cool. And she was like taken aback. And she's like, that was it? And I'm like, well, you could have said yes. You could have said no. You said, you know, it's not ideally what I wanted, but I will respect that as an option and let's just move forward. And we're still friends.
That's awesome.
You know?
Yeah, that's so cool. And that it's funny. It kind of reminds me when I asked my now wife out, we were part of a small group. We got together for games. So I was really nervous. Like if I asked her out, she wouldn't feel comfortable coming back if she said no. So I had this plan. I'm like, if she says no, I'm going to just say, hey, seriously, no problem. I want to be your friend still. You know where to find me if you change my mind. So I asked her out and she was like, yes. And I didn't plan for a yes. So I was like, oh, didn't plan this route.
See, if you would have known that there's multiple options there, it wouldn't have been, that's great though, that, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It worked out.
Yeah, it did. I think she thought it was cute.
There you go.
She had to guide me. You could ask for my number now. Yes. Number,
yeah, there you go. That's what I want. Yes. If it makes you feel any better, my wife, I sat on a plane next to her for 3 hours working up the courage to ask her out.
Yeah.
And didn't talk to her the entire time. She finally leaned over to me and she goes, are you mad at me? And I'm like, will you go out with me? Like, and she's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, cool. You know? I have zero game. I'm okay with that.
Oh, man.
Out. We've been together for 25 years. It's fine.
Well, we're just giving hope to all those nerds out there. Like,
there you go. Yeah, exactly.
You got this. Don't worry. That's such a cool. That's so much fun. Okay. Well, this is we're going to piggyback into the next clip. And this I'm super excited to talk about. It's the scene that you were talking about, but we'll see it kind of play out. Okay. And just as soon as we get it right there. Okay. So we'll watch this clip and we will learn so much more from Teacher Paul.
Simon, I found your camera.
That's great, Jack. I've got no more room in here. Listen, lose it to the next trip, okay?
What is this?
This is my stuff.
What do you mean stuff?
Clothes.
It's ridiculous.
What is it?
Your favorite.
Darcy! Darcy!
Don't worry, Simon. I'll save you.
Simon, I just thought that...
Okay, Jack.
I'm not lugging that thing through the jungle.
Don't worry, it's my bag. I'll carry it.
You lift this baby off the floor and I'll carry both you and it.
I might take you up on that sometime. Come on, Darcy, let's go.
You've let yourself get out of shape. It's sad.
Come here, kid. What's the trick?
Oh, no trick. Simon just put liquid helium pouches inside. Release the gas and it counterbalances the weight. I designed the release.
That is, I forgot they had the candy. So if you're watching this on YouTube, his weakness is candy. He's got a sweet tooth. Or as he said, I've got a mouthful of them. And so that's what that was apart. But yeah, no, that was so cool. And I didn't catch it the first time because I was like, what's the big deal? He just picked it up. And then I went back and I'm like, oh, that guy couldn't carry it.
Right.
So when you saw that clip,
I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I watched a grown man fail at something. And then somebody, now, it's not it. You know, when you see a dwarf as a child, you relate because we're both small in stature.
Yeah.
And so to see a grown, big, strong, normal, quote unquote, normal sized person struggle, but then you see someone who is almost childlike be able to do something, it just brings out in you as a kid. You're like, oh, wow, look at and it's because he used his imagination. And it's what sings to me about it. And it was such a simple delivery.
Yeah.
Like a simple solution. It wouldn't work.
Right.
As an adult, I know this now, but as a kid, I thought, of course, that's what would be the answer to that. And I mean, you'll see later on, we've talked about the clip. He flies with it too. I mean, it's got so much lift in it that you can actually like fly. And it's like, no, that wouldn't work. But the suspension of disbelief, the magic of it. And I love the fact that the magic was based in science.
Yeah.
Because as a kid, because of my childhood, I like dove into education and I loved school. I loved to learn as much as I could. And so then to see someone not only use imagination and the magic of life, but to use science and education to get there, I was like, oh, it's such a kismet moment for me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with MacGyver, which, I mentioned earlier, because it does the same thing. It's a paperclip and some bubble gum and you can create, a bomb or whatever you need.
Yeah.
and for the longest time, people used to call me MacGyver because I can come up with all these random solutions to things. But honestly, I'd rather be the wizard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. The other thing I was going to say I like about it is both clips, he was kind of being underestimated.
Absolutely. And he is the entire show. And that's the thing, is because as a dwarf, you're always underestimated. Yeah. Because you think there's something wrong, quote unquote, wrong with him. Yeah. And as a child who comes from an abusive home or, it's the same thing. You have this internal processing where you think that something is missing. And then to be underestimated by life, but then to show life, as to quote Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. Yeah. It's so empowering, and it kind of just shows you from anybody who's in a disadvantaged position, and shows them that there is potential if you use your mind and your imagination.
Yeah. I love that. I also like that he was like, what's the trick? And he's like, no trick. And it reminds me of Spider-Man No Way Home, where Spider-Man's fighting Doctor Strange. And he goes, hey, Doctor Strange, you know what's cooler than magic? Math. And
I had the opportunity as an adult to work with David Copperfield.
I am not surprised at this point.
Segue. But to see, and I love magic. I love magic. And I make it a point now, when my wife and I travel, we try to find magic shows to go to.
Oh, nice.
And she always leans to me and she's like, okay, how is it done? And it's because I know how a lot of these things are done. But to me, the joy is to still be fooled knowing how it's done. And so when he's like, what's the trick? And it's like, it doesn't lose, even though he says, oh, it's just helium pouches inside there, it doesn't lose the magic.
Oh, I like that.
And so and isn't all magic just science we don't know yet?
Right.
And so to look at, any situation, you're like, how do they do that? Same thing with working with David Copperfield. It's these situations in which you're like, he's flying, or, he made 20 people disappear. And then to see how it works, but then to still see it from the audience and go, holy crap, that's very effective. And still knowing the trick and being fooled, it's just such a wonderful thing.
That is so cool. I know I'm always torn. Like when I see magic tricks, I'm like, I gotta know. But then I'm like, I don't want to either.
I find I will tell, like when I go to these shows, people will ask me, because I talk, I'm just a loud, because my wife's, we're just chatting about it. But people will ask, and I will only give away ones that are really obvious. For the other ones, I just say it's just magic. You just have the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah,
we're not as smart as we think we are.
Yeah,
and it's okay. It's okay. And I think, but that childlike wonder that we get when we're fooled, isn't that what creativity is all about?
Right.
isn't that what imagination is for?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I just, there's just so much here to unpack of, you know, he used science to be creative, and just thinking about all the, like you were talking about when you're going to the store, thinking of like, there are other ways this can be used. I mean, if we apply that in, basic life, I think our lives would be a lot more enjoyable. and also I think there's that magic that comes with it. And I, like when I'm with my boys and they see something for the first time, when I did my first silly amateur definition of a trick, and they were like, whoa, how did you get that penny from that hand to that hand? Even though I just had 2 pennies in my hand, they're blown away. It's something simple. And I think we kind of, I don't know, do you think we lose that wonder of like,
I was actually talking about this today on social media. And what happens is when we're born and we before we are taught anything, we have boundless imagination. Anything is possible. Mm-hmm. But then knowledge starts to build a house around our creativity. And so everything that we learn from, this is an apple, that's a monkey makes this sound.
Yeah.
All of those things become these bricks, and eventually we wall ourselves in. Yeah. But the thing that we forget to add are doors and windows. The doors and windows allow us to see and experience magic and nonsense, so that we can bring it back into our house. We don't have to live in it, but we just have to be able to experience it from time to time so that we don't become completely walled in knowledge and facts.
Yeah, no, that's great. And one thing this podcast is evolving into is I want people to see things through other people's eyes. And I think it's very magical the way media and TV shows can bring people together, and it can teach us about things without having to like be directly like, well, I believe in magic. And it can be like, you can just point to this and say, man, look at this, look how cool it is. And it kind of, you drop the guard and you just soak it in. But I was also thinking about, so I had a data analyst on the podcast about a month ago, and we were talking about how when we do the thing that we find joy in, even though it's totally different, we're going for the same thing. For her, she talked about how she created this spreadsheet that she could put in the daily, like, I don't know if it was the crossword puzzle, but something in a puzzle in New York. And that was so creative and magic for her. And I'm like, I hate spreadsheets. No, thank you. But she had that joy in creating it. So I love the idea that I got to ask you, when you're doing your work in your studio, do you ever feel like a little kid? Do you ever just feel that magic, or has it ever kind of hit to a point where you're like, this is just work?
It really depends on the job.
Yeah.
What I try to do is when I meet with a client or a company hires me, they usually come to me because they have a problem that needs to be solved. And that's why when I say I make the things that people want that they can't get anywhere else. And it's because they have a wish and a desire. It also ties into the Santa Claus thing. And it's that they want to see if that can become tangible. And so what I do is I try to see it through their perspective. And so a lot of people will come to me, like I do a lot of custom engagement ring boxes where people will, their nerdiness, like you met during tabletop gaming. So we would take your favorite tabletop game and we would create a ring box based on that. I do a lot of Harry Potter stuff. I do a lot of, but I like to include little magic tricks inside of it. So sometimes there's hidden compartments or that kind of stuff, just so that there is a little bit of magic inside of it. Now, for me, the objects themselves aren't necessarily the thing that I would lean towards. To me, it's the process, the trying to figure out how to make something small, but magical enough that, and I've had people, I was at a concert once, a random concert. It was Crash Test Dummies, a band I love from the 80s and 90s. Yeah. And I was in my hometown, and I was sitting at a table, a 4-top, but it was just my wife and I. And this random couple came up and they were just looking around for seats, and we're like, oh, you can have these other 2 seats. So we're there. I had happened to have made figures, custom figures for the band, and I had given them to them.
Yeah.
So they came out on stage and they're like, we don't want to brag, but there's a guy in the audience named Paul Pape who made us our own custom action figures. And I was like, oh, thank you. That was very nice. After the concert, I was standing around, I was talking to the keyboardist, and the couple came up to me and they said, we don't know if you're the same guy, but did you make our wedding cake top?
Oh my gosh.
From 12 years earlier.
Yeah.
And it was one of the ones that I made, and I still remembered the piece, and it was on my phone. I'm like, this one right here. And the funny thing is like when you can make a memory tangible, like a proposal is something that just happens, and you might be able to film it, you might get a photograph of it, but for the most part, it's an intangible thing. It just happens. It's ethereal. But if you can take that moment and make it a tangible, that has so much weight to it, and people will hold it, and it becomes this precious thing. Now, it doesn't mean anything to anyone else, and when they pass, they might give it to the kids. The kids might be like, whatever. But but to them, I managed to capture magic and that they can witness. And when they see it, they don't just see the object, they see the memory.
Yes. Oh.
And that's what I'm trying to capture. So when I sit in my studio and I make these things, that's what I'm trying to capture. I'm trying to see if I can pull memories together so that when you see that magic is always there.
Wow, that is so beautifully said. I appreciate that mindset, and that's something I've taken up when. There's a couple jobs I worked as like a manager. One of them was a company called Fantasy Flight Games, and they do a lot of different board games. And when I do a team meeting, I'd be like, okay, guys, I know we think we're just making basic games, but you know what? Somebody's going to meet their best friend playing this game. Somebody's going to meet their wife playing this game. And same thing for when I was manager of we designed or we embroidered and screen print different garments. And you could tell when the people were just like, oh, it's just another shirt. And it's like, hey, remember, guys, whenever I had this talk, I'd always wear my white shoes. I don't know why. I felt like I looked rocking in white shoes. Loved it. So I'd always say, these white shoes, they make me feel confident. A shirt you're making for when it goes to a medical facility, that's going to be the first shirt a new intern puts on for the first time. And so I love that idea of creating, just like you said, creating tangible memories. It's so powerful. Yeah. So before we go on, I always ask, is there anything else you want to cover that we haven't talked about yet with these clips?
As far as just make space. I like to tell people to make a daily practice of using your imagination. We used to call it brainstorming. So what I say is for me, it's the morning because that's when I'm my clearest, but some people it'd be the afternoon or at night. But give yourself 5-10 minutes and just find something around your house and try to figure out 10 different ways to make it better.
Wow.
And it can be ridiculous, like your fork phone. Those kind of ideas, that amount of imagination that you use, even if it's silly, is a great practice because then you'll start to perceive the world with possibility as opposed to being very black and white.
Yes.
And so create that personal practice every single day to use a little bit more creativity, to use your imagination to play. When was the last time you've got little kids, I assume.
Yep.
So you play all the time. We were playing paper airplanes the other morning with my boys waiting for school to start. We're just throwing them around. But what people don't understand is you're teaching aerodynamics. You're talking thrust. We're talking about muscles. I mean, there's so many different things that go into this that we're not even thinking about. We're just tossing a paper airplane around. Those types of moments, they're quintessential, not just for children, but for adults as well. We really need to lean into this and just enjoy ourselves, have fun.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. I am so glad you are getting into speaking because you are good at it and you have a great message that I really, this is so perfect because we hadn't talked about this until you got on the show. But this is like core to my heart of
Good.
why I've got this part. And just, I still play Dungeons and Dragons every Tuesday.
Excellent.
And I'm the DM, and I love coming up with new ideas, and just it's like my form of self-care.
Sure.
And so, yeah. And that's the other thing I was thinking, like, not only in doing your creativity, doing something like in your case that you love.
Yeah.
You're spreading that joy.
Absolutely.
To other people. So like, that's something to keep in mind. Maybe you're nervous to try something, but your creativity could lead to somebody else's joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you put yourself out there, and a lot of people are nervous because, and first off, I'd like to define creativity does not mean artist. It can be the person who does the spreadsheets. It can be a cook. Yeah. It can be a person who changes tires. If they're passionate about it and they really, it clicks with them, that's creativity. It doesn't have to be art. But when you put that out there with love, I mean, because that's really what we do. When we pour ourselves into something, we're pouring, I like to say artists are soul ambassadors, or creatives are soul ambassadors. Yeah. It's because that's the thing that recharges us at the end of the day. Like, we like to relax. We relax by watching YouTube or the television, or you're playing your Dungeons and Dragons, or playing a video game, whatever, reading a book, or just listening to music, driving in our car, whatever it is, that takes our creative mind to make those things. Mm-hmm. And so when we put that out there for others to enjoy, it expands them. It refuels their soul. And so don't be afraid to put your stuff out there, to try it, because there's 8.1 billion people on this planet. And to be a successful creative, you only need to have 100 of those people be fans.
I love that. That's such a good perspective on that. And it also kind of, you're talking about like anything can be your passion. And reminded me of, there's a podcast called Invisibilia, and they were talking about this guy who changed hot dog competitions forever, because they were like, most people are like, I'm just going to try to eat. And then he was like, what if I dipped it in water? What if I did this? And he looked at it like a sport, and then he doubled the record, and just, it changed the game. And I mean, it wasn't that complex. He was just being creative.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And and here's the thing, but there's a side to that we don't think about. Mm-hmm. Education plays a huge role in that, because you only know what you know. And if you are limited in your spectrum of knowledge, then it's hard to pull information from elsewhere to be creative. The reason I wander hardware stores looking at all the stuff, how they shouldn't be made, is because your subconscious brain catalogs all of that. And so when you're trying to problem solve, your subconscious brain is actually really good at parsing information from elsewhere. And so if you're working on, if he was like, I always have a cup of water, he never thought to put that together until one day he's like, well, I drink the water to make the bread go down. The bread go down easier with water. Yeah. What if I didn't take the time to drink, but instead dipped, and then there we go. That's necessity, but it's necessity playing off of other information. Yeah. And so many things in this world have been created with that in mind, because when I just did a job for Disney where I made these headphones, kind of like yours that you have cans, but it was for the movie The Creator. They wanted these giveaways, but the androids in that movie have holes through their heads. Yeah. And so Disney's like, we want headphones that make it look like people have holes through their heads. How do you do that? And I was like, how would I do that? Well, instantly I knew the answer, because I love magic and I know what an infinity mirror is. Yeah. And so I was like, what if I put infinity mirrors in each side? So when you look through it, it looks like it goes on forever. And they're like, that's brilliant. Where'd you come up with that? I'm like, well, as a kid, I used to like magic, and we used to do the same with this mirrors, and and that's your subconscious is pulling from all of these different areas. So you're not just thinking headphone design, you're thinking headphones, and then magic, and then lights. And so it all ties in together. So make sure when you are doing your daily practice, also just try and learn, just deep dive into something that's interesting to you. It doesn't have to be school. I know a lot of people get hung up on education means school. No, we look at YouTube all the time. Yeah, we listen to podcasts, right? Whatever, we doom scroll like everyone else does. That there's information to be parsed from that. And the more that we take it in, I mean, look at your chunky borks. My kids love their fat little animals to look at. But at the same time, every once in a while, just like look at a woodworker. Like watch how they do something. Or like my favorite show is How It's Made. I don't know if you watch. Oh my God, I could have it on repeat because somebody had to figure out how to make all the things that make the things that we're watching. And it's because they used to do it by hand, and they're like, well, if I'm always doing this, is there something that I can make that can do this for me? And then can I make it do it 100 times at once? That's all that is. And it's just pulling out information from other places and putting it together. And that's all through education. Yeah. So education and then exploration.
I feel like not only can we think about it, I would love to see more teachers like you in the classroom just to like push that. We have to change something else first. And that is because unfortunately the metric in which we establish success needs to change, because right now the metric for success is correct answers, not imaginative play. Right. And so we need to change that metric first. And what's really interesting is in that study of creativity crisis, they were talking to a bunch of different countries, and they were talking to their leaders about this metric. And they said that when they finished translating it for them, they started to laugh. And they said, what's funny is that you guys are racing towards our old model, and we are racing towards your old model. The rest of the world is trying to be the creativity nexus that America used to be. We used to be the front runner. Yeah. But now we've changed gears to be more about answers and about solving solutions as opposed to playing in exploration. And now every other country is doing that. And so now we're going to be playing catch up. So we need to change our metrics and what we measure as success. Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's great. That's crazy. But I mean, wow. Somehow that doesn't surprise me, but I feel like I just need to soak all that in still, because there's just like, I should put in a little clip here. Like, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Joe soaking it in. And just
2 months later. That's right.
So I always have 3 questions I ask each of my guests.
Okay.
So the first question is, which of the 2 clips was more meaningful to you?
It's definitely the second one.
Second one?
Yeah.
And just that creative, just that science that sparked.
It's the science and magic, but also the fact that someone who faced adversity and was undervalued could conquer both to the chagrin of those who said he couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. You almost swayed my answer, but I'm going to go with the first clip just because I love that line. I know where we're going. We're going out the front door. Yeah. And I needed to hear that more when I was younger. Just so scared to try, so scared of failure. And when
let's say it's a tie, because I think it's important that both of those are taken away.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And when I finally got to the point, for me, when I finally accepted that I was kind of a dork, I became incredibly cool.
Yeah.
And when I accept that sometimes things are going to fail, I go for way more things. And just like, oh, shucks, I didn't work out.
Did you learn something?
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Exactly. Second question is, which clip did you feel like we got more meaningful conversation out of?
I would say definitely the first one on that one.
Yeah.
Just because I think in the world of creativity, while the other one really spoke to me as in my soul, as in my personal journey, I think that to be able to accept a journey, to begin, that is really, it stops so many people from trying to achieve anything, for the fear of failure. And that first step is always so frightening. And I think both of us got a lot more out of that from the point of, I've never let that stand in my way, but you mentioned that you did, but you've seen like how it's helped me throughout my life. And then you're doing these things, you're creating these podcasts, you're inspiring others, you're raising children.
Yeah.
And if you raise them with that idea, where that if you live that ideal, your children will live that ideal.
Yep.
If you don't live it, they won't either.
Yeah, they are definitely, quick side story. So there's an old song called the Yay Boo song. And it goes like, yay boo, it's so much fun to do. If you like it, you holler yay. If you don't, you holler boo. And I would do this to my kids whenever there was something they didn't like. I'd be like, well, you got to go to bed. Well, yay boo, yay boo. Well, this was like a month or two ago. I was getting ready in the morning, and my oldest, who's Jack, he's 8, he grabbed my deodorant and went in the other room. And then like a minute later, I hear my youngest son, James, who's 6, go, Dad, Jack is using your deodorant on his nuts. And I go, Jack, come on, man. And then he sings me the Yay Boo song. I was so proud of him in that moment. That's awesome. I was just like, you are brilliant. No foul.
Yeah, no foul. Excellent. That's great.
So yeah, I agree with you. See, I'm kind of at a tie because I think we got the most meaningful conversation out of the first one, but I love seeing your passion come out of the second one.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then the final question is, if we had to take one of these clips and just do a huge deep dive and just like dissect the heck out of it, which clip would you pick?
I think it's going to be the second one because there's a lot more going on there. And I'm going to include the candy in that as well, because Vice is one of those, like, not allowing ourselves to have that thing that we want and desire, and to have somebody who kind of, because moderation is key on a lot of different things. And I think that that's actually very important, but he has a support system. So he has a temptation, which is the kid, but he has a support system in Gates McFadden.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important, but then also to never underestimate. So there's so much we could go into in just that little bit of them sitting in the garage. Yeah. But, and that who was the engineer? Who was a child.
Yeah.
The child was the one who came up with the delivery system. Not some elderly dude, not some wizened guy who's some engineer. It's a kid. Why? Because a kid's going to think outside the box.
Right.
I mean, there's so much we could go into.
Yeah.
With that. So I'm going to say the second.
I 100% agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's so much looking at, that the guy was almost looked offended that he couldn't do it. Like, he grabs the kid and he's like, what's the trick? And then also just, like you said, I think I'm just going to quote you. This is the first one. So only one more, and then I can just steal it. That your ordinary is somebody else's extraordinary.
Yep.
And one of the things I always talk about, I tell so many people, a moment that changed my life was I went to go meet a mentor of mine, my youth leader, and his car was the only car in the parking lot. I was 16. I just got my driver's license. And as I was going in, I'm like, wouldn't that be funny if I hit his car? I did not hit his car. Everybody's first reaction is like, what did you do? I'm like, no. I just had that thought it would be funny. I parked great. But then I go in and I said, man, what would you do if I hit your car? And he goes, it's just a car. And that was the first time in my life I felt more important than something. He doesn't remember it, but I will always remember it.
Isn't that interesting how somebody can say something flippantly and yet it is a pivot on your entire life? I mean, isn't that weird? Like that one thing means so much to you. Like it's Uncle Ben telling Peter, with great, power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
So flippant, but at the same time, it's not. It becomes his core.
Yeah, definitely. So it's all just, yeah. This was wonderful. I'm wondering if you could tell people, like, if I'm willing to bet money people are going to hear this and be like, dude, Paul's cool. Let's reach out to him. Where could people find you, reach out to you? I know you said you have a Twitch account. Like, where can people find you on all those?
I'm Paul Pape Designs with an S, pretty much everywhere. It's Pape like paper without the R. So Paul Pape Designs, pretty much everywhere. I also have another, so like paulpapedesigns.com is where you can find all of my art stuff. Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, Twitch, all of that is Paul Pape Designs. I also have Paul Pape It, so it's paulpape.it, which is where you can, if you are interested in knowing more about being creative, if you would like to have me come in and talk to you guys about embracing creativity within the workplace or just individually, coaching, consulting, that's on paulpape.it, which is Paul Pape it, because I'd rather you Paul Pape it than not.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking to you, audience, the Paul you're seeing here, this is what I got before we even started recording. This is not an act. This is who he is. Paul, I think you're very special. I really like what you're doing. And I think you deserve every good thing that's coming your way. And I will be showing my kids this. I will be showing them what you do because I want them to think more like you.
Excellent.
So
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. I say this sometimes, if you guys, for whatever reason, like my voice, I have a second podcast called Two Voices, One Story. Totally different format. It's where me and my wife talk about very personal struggles through depression and our oldest son's medical issues and so forth. So if you want to check that out, cool. Other than that, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It was a treat and a pleasure. And hopefully in the future, you'd be up for coming back.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Cool. I hope the moment we hit record, you're like, just kidding. No, where I won't.
It won't happen, but okay.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.